Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Battlefield Podcast. Today, we're going to be starting a series called We the People, where we're covering current events from different perspectives while we're still living the life Christ wants us to live in intentional discipleship. Let's get started. Okay, fellas. Hey, guys. How you doing? We got Mr. James Wyndham, Pastor Rick, it's little old me, Chris. And today, like I said, we're going to be talking about we the people, man. Today is going to be a good show because me and James were talking about the political climate that we are here in America, and of course, me and Pastor had the episode where we were talking about it, and I just wanted to bring these different perspectives together because we're all believers and we all have to live the life Christ wants us to live, but we see it from different perspectives. And that is actually a beautiful thing. That's not a bad thing. But as we all know, the way our country is going, it's so much divide and we're so focused on what we don't have in common that it overshadows what we really say we believe, right? So I wanted to talk about that today. So just to start off, from everybody's perspective, how are you looking at the political climate right now? What is like an overview? Bad, going down, terrible? What do you think?
I look at the current state as a very divisive. In a sense, we continue to create a narrative that is force-fed by the various parties, political parties, but the people themselves have not yet owned their particular role in all of this.
Yes.
And the reason that I, believe the title was so sufficient is because first, it was always about the people. It was. That's the forefathers. That's how they envisioned it. It is because that's the current state. And the reason that we title and we the people is that we want people to recognize they own this thing. Every politician in our government is termed. If you know that the party that you support, that particular candidate has not done the things that he or she promised to do, then you have ownership to say, well, you no longer represent the things that I believe in. Therefore, this next term, I'm going to support and vote for someone else. That's the power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. The division that we see, and we live in a crazy time where we have more access to information ever before, and we seem to be also living in an age of ignorance. Right, because we can go all the way back to when Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?" And then we get to right now we're bearing the fruit and harvesting the end of postmodernism. And I think that's spilled over into our political climate and our political lives to where, yeah, when we look at politicians are not supposed to be in power. They're supposed to be serving the people.
Yes.
And we've lost that. And I think about everything you see, we have a short memory. We're living in, some of the apocalyptic literature that we've had that things like 1984 and some of those where things we thought could never happen. They're literally happening right now where people have such a short attention span politically that we don't remember what happened in the last administration or the administration before that or the administration before that. And then the politicians will get up and say, well, look at this one and look at this. And then they can get up and present the same data and have completely different spins on it. Right. But yeah, I think that right now we're in a dangerous time because we've harbored, in America, an anti-education sentiment for a while. And now we're that's also coming to bear fruit. And we've harbored really an anti-authoritarian, meaning that we've got to a point where we can't trust anything that's organized, any institution, because of the failures of those institutions, right? And so now we have people that don't know how to research, and have a innate distrust of anything. So then they have to latch on to something they can trust. And when it comes to politics, it becomes, I'm going to support a party because I'm against a person. And then they don't ask, like we were talking about before, we're not asking the critical questions. And when you do, you're automatically pushed to saying you must be for the other side. Where it's like, no. If we want to make our own party, whatever that is, our own party is better, we have to ask the tough question. We should be asking harder questions than they're asking, whoever they is, and so, yeah, I think we are such a divisive time that it's almost feeling like it's getting to a scary level.
When I look at it, Chris and I were talking the other day about looking at what he was going to do about Jesus, basically. And he got to the point where he recognized that there was nothing he could see worthy of, causing this perfect person to die. And so he left it up to the people. And the people left it up to the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the religious leaders of their time. Pretty much, that's where we are today. The individual who has the right and the power to discern based on an innate component within them, to honestly see what's happening. They have become so anesthetized to the point where they're relegating their throne, their ownership, their authority to others who have become blinded by their own desires for position, wealth, or whatever. And now we are so afraid that we're going to lose out. I feel disenfranchised. Well, you're only disenfranchised because you have relegated your whole entire life to the voices of other people outside of yourself. You go to church and you're seeking still someone to speak for you as opposed to taking the ownership that you have. And as a result of that fear-based type of thinking, then you vote for the person most likely to provide whatever it is that you think you need to survive, to have a great life. And when that person doesn't provide it for you, then you say the system is bad. Well, you are the system.
That's right.
You're the person that controls the system.
Yeah.
And so if we continue to go down that path, I will see us, and Chris and I were talking about this the other day, we don't recognize when we become less free until we're less free. And then if we're not careful, we'll wake up one morning and realize that we have become a country that has no freedom. Because when the president can say, we no longer want a television station called PBS that provides some very great educational programming, but because they don't adhere to what he wants them to adhere to, he can pull the plug on that station. Then what does it mean when I'm talking about him? I could be arrested. So slowly we become a country that doesn't even resemble the vision that we had initially. So if we're going to do anything, it's two things in my estimation. We have to educate the people about their role. And then secondarily, we have to remind them that they're more than just the person in the eyeballs and the nose that we see in the mirror in the morning. And if we could just get to that place where we recognize our true essence, which is a spiritual-based essence, then it's easier for us to see the entity that comes down the escalator and recognize what we're seeing long before push the button and say we vote for whomever.
Yeah.
Y'all are both right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked earlier, and one of the things that you brought up was the idea that when you are connected to Christ, it's always not Christ doing the work, you doing the work. And when you emphasize that to me, I always think of even from the very beginning in Genesis, when God said to Adam, we were naked. He says, who told you? In essence, it went from a conversation that I'm a victim to now you're the one. You can change. You don't have to accept this new label that you created up for yourself. And so, in a sense, our role is to educate people not only about, again, we got to educate them about the various parties. How did the Republican Party, how did it originate?
Mhm.
And when you think of it, when you go back into the history of the Republican Party, they were the ones who supported women's suffrage.
Mhm.
They were the ones who supported freeing the slaves. And so that Republican Party that existed in the 1868 is no longer the Republican Party that we know today. And the reason being is they decided they become the moral majority spokesperson. And now they decided that they were going to go into our bedrooms and everything else to determine who's going. And you accepted that. Why? Because you didn't know any better.
You hit a point because me and Pastor talk about the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Putting them in every school.
Mhm.
I say, instead of putting them in every school, why don't we live them? And then
Yeah.
we're trying to force feed this stuff.
Mhm.
And it more laws making more laws has never worked.
No.
We have to
In
be
the
the-
garden, they had one law.
Yeah.
They broke it.
Yeah.
Then God gave them 10 laws, and we broke it. And now we have in America, we have around 40,000 laws, federal laws.
And
Right.
some of those laws have been on the books for
For-
hundreds of years.
Yeah.
That needs to be, it got rid of,
Right.
but nevertheless.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I believe about our government, and because I'm more of I'm a conservative leaning libertarian centralist. I don't know, but so there's that saying that says when you realize the left wing and the right wing are attached to the same bird, and the whole goal is to keep that bird in flight, you start to understand our political system. And the time that I've been able to vote, we've had Republican presidents and Democrat presidents, and our nation has not gotten better under either.
This is one of the things that I was telling Chris. When I was a kid, your parents went to vote, and you sort of accepted that as a natural part of being in our society. I'm supposed to vote. But they voted for the president. And so that was your whole role, vote for the president. And everything that happened in our country was a result of that voting for the president. But if the president is not supported by a legislature that is in alignment with his vision, his goal,
Mhm.
then the president is like when Barack Obama won the second term, the Republicans said, we're not going to say yes to anything he does.
Mhm.
And so any legislation that he would provide create that would be a benefit to the American populace, the Republicans are not going to support it. And so they're going to create a narrative that says, this guy, he's no good. Anything he wants to do is against the American populace. And so what we find out is when we look at the data, almost 38% of the population in America don't vote.
Yeah.
And they don't vote because they begin to drink the Kool-Aid. And the narrative says that my voice doesn't matter. Only 12%, sometimes 20%, vote for local elections. The mayor, the city council, the governor, even. And so when you have less participation from the local level, you're going to have less or even sometimes miscued involvement in this federal level. And so when we look at our country, it is not because the people who are in the offices are bad, it is because the people who put them in offices are unaware and ignorant of why they did what they did. And so 2 years later, 4 years later, because everybody has a term, Joe Smuckatelli will go into the booth, push the button for the same name simply because he recognizes the name, not because the person has done anything consistent with what the needs of the people are.
Mhm.
And so 4 years later, when things are still corrupt and going crazy, he will vote again for the same person simply because of name recognition.
Mhm.
And again, it is because now that person, when interviewed or in a survey, will say, I don't understand why the government doesn't hear me, doesn't do what I say it's supposed to do, even though on the news, you'll hear the Republican Party or the Democratic Party says, and the American people, this is what they want.
Yeah. I wasn't ever really big into politics, man. The first politician that we helped with their campaign was a local council person for Garland. And Garland is a city about 200, something around there. I was setting up a campaign to reach about 200,000 people. You're getting all the different stats, what the population was. And he looked at me and said, hey, Chris, oh no, man, like, I only need 1,000 votes. I was like, what do you mean? Only need 4,000. But it's a big city.
Yeah.
It's just like, Chris, people don't come out and vote, man. I was like, whoa, are you serious?
For one, by single digits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's scary. That was my eye-opening moment, but it turns out, like what you said, they don't feel like they have any power. What does it matter? They do turn out more from the president and stuff because there's a lot of more money in your face.
Mm-hmm.
But that shattered my view of things.
Yes.
And it was pretty wild to see that.
What if
Yeah.
we could convince the American populace, the eligible voter, that if the person that you're voting for, if you keep track of things that they support for just that 2 years or 4 years, whatever, some states do 4 years. But if you keep track and you decide that out of the 5 of the things that you said you wanted them to do, and they only did 1, and you decided that you would vote them out for that second term, and you would see a difference in how the government would work, all of a sudden that will give you more energy, more emphasis, more excitement to continue that role. But if you go to sleep every session
Mhm.
and you just go back to what it's been, it's really not the government's fault. It's you.
Mhm.
For instance, the big to-do was when Kennedy was running for president. They made a big deal. The Republican Party made a big deal of him being a Catholic.
Uh-huh.
It was the first time a Catholic would be president, and they just knew that making that an issue would cause the American populace not to vote for Kennedy.
Mhm.
And he got a landslide, and the people were excited. Bay of Pigs. Kennedy had a choice. He could blame the Cubans or whatever, but he decided that he would take ownership of the fiasco. And his advisors kept telling him that if you did that, you'll lose the next election because people will not like you or whatever. His popularity rose. People have the power, and that's what they keep trying to usurp in all of their the narratives that are created, is to usurp that power. There's nothing different than in the Garden of Eden when the serpent said to Eve, "Are you sure?"
Yeah. Does God
He
really
created
say?
a new narrative.
Just doubt.
Yeah.
If you keep that up, eventually we'll believe whatever the new narrative is.
And the people need to also realize that a lot of these politicians are career.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think there should be term limits for judges as well as
absolutely. We
Congress.
never thought
Yeah.
that would be the case until this current Supreme Court, where it just seems that the Supreme Court is more about aligning themselves with the president as opposed to aligning themselves with the Constitution. So if we were to consider how dysfunctional the government has become, we need to look at how do we reestablish the honor,
Mhm.
the character.
Yeah. I think, and also I think that because of like what you're saying, we have, so I'm going to use a little bit stronger terms. We have an ignorant populace. You're right. Yeah. He'll tell you. I kind of, because I think sometimes we need that shock to say we don't educate ourselves. And so when we don't educate ourselves, we remain intentionally ignorant. Right. And so then we have a populace that doesn't know what, and so that's the reason I've always thought that the straight party ticket, being able to just go click, I'm going to vote Democrat or I'm going to vote, is really dangerous. Yeah. Because personally, like, I tell people, I vote purple. I don't vote red or blue because sometimes I think in certain, places, a different candidate does a better job. But we also have gotten into such with the mudslinging and the other stuff, we don't vote for a candidate anymore. We vote against a candidate. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, and we get into this thing of, if our candidate was on the other side, we would tear that dude apart, right? Whatever that candidate is. Cause like, I'm going to use the example of, because like, all right, so Republican Party used to be about smaller government, less regulation, less government spending. So generally when you had a Republican in office, they would start cutting things, right? And the Democrat Party was more about taking care of the people. Let's serve the underserved, and it's the government's job to do that. So, right. So, but now that's not the case. That's really not been the case on the Republican side since about George W. Bush. In
the 80s.
Yeah.
When the moral majority reared its head, the Republican Party went from considering, as you say, a smaller government, cutting, he's trying to balance the budget, what have you, to now is about how we're going to reshape the narrative of America. I mean, America is going to hell in a handbasket. If it wasn't for the Democrats and the liberals, we wouldn't be going through the things that we're going through. And so the narrative kept shifting to that place. That's where we are today. But yet, if you were to look at the data, the Republican Party hasn't balanced the budget since the late 1800s.
Yeah.
The last time we've had a balanced budget and a surplus was under Clinton, 1995.
Yeah, and when you look at today's standards, Clinton would be considered a conservative now.
Correct, absolutely,
because they were about strong border, immigration control and things. Yeah, and so I mean, all of that stuff we have, man. Yeah, there's just so much. Yeah.
Now I'm this way. When Trump won the first time and won it the second time, I didn't vote either time for him. But I always thought, here's a guy with a humongous opportunity to change things totally, because he's not political. He's none of those things. Even today, when you consider that the war he started, we're spending about $1 billion a day in relationship to this war. What if he were to have said, you know what, in making America great again, since you all voted me in, this is what you want. We're going to fix it so that college education is free for everybody. We're also going to make sure that everybody has a job. So therefore, we're going to make sure that we have major projects, infrastructure going on all the time to make sure that there will be no unemployment. Right now, we already know our bridges, because they need to redo all of their infrastructure. And that's a huge amount of money that could be spent. But imagine spending $1 billion a day to correct things that have been not taken care of for the last 50, 60 years. he would be another Roosevelt. The only reason Roosevelt didn't have another fifth term was because he died in office. Because he was so popular, because of the things that he put together, the New Deal, all of that, put America back. Everybody was working, the money was flowing. Trump would be a shoe-in. And as much as we don't want a king, he would probably be a king.
And I'll tell you this too. That's like what we're talking about though. As far as people, we have this block. That's what Christ came. Nobody's perfect, but we have this block in seeing things from the wrong perspective. Like what you just said. He wants to be a king. He thinks he's doing things on that path. There's another path he could be taken.
Yeah.
To do those things. I told my wife the same thing. Man, he has this opportunity here. Because one of the things with Hillary was when she was running, I didn't realize she had been in politics damn near as long as I've been alive. And it just stuck me up. I did not realize she had been in politics that long. I was like, man, why is she just talking about her record?
Because they can't stand on it because they've changed so much.
She could have easily just demolished Trump. If she would have went on her record.
Because America, if you look at the data, when it comes to a woman being president, it's so abhorrent to most Americans, particularly even women and Black men, that they could not see themselves voting for a woman president. I mean, that's just data. I mean, it's interesting I don't understand it myself, because in NATO, some of the most developed countries are run by women and doing quite well. But for whatever reason, we seem to have some sort of aversion to having a woman as the leader. Now, we can have it on TV, but in real life, we seem to move away from that, because if you think of it, when Hillary ran against Trump, Hillary lost. When Trump ran against Biden, Trump lost. Now, Biden, in some people's minds, wasn't that great as a leader, but he was better than Trump. So they voted for Trump. I mean, they voted for Biden. However, when Trump ran again, and he ran against Kamala Harris, Trump won. And he won. I mean, the Electoral College, that's another subject matter we need to look at too. Because the only reason that they ever had an Electoral College was because at the time that they created it, the communication wasn't what it is today. And so you could have Virginia, the people of Virginia not knowing that John James Wyndham is running for president, because the news had not gotten to Virginia, and so therefore they had to create a way that they could get equal participation. So the electoral technology is so far.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another subject.
Yeah. Well, I mean, electoral college is brilliant, though. It is absolutely brilliant to make sure every person's vote, as close as it can count. Because otherwise, if you didn't have the electoral college, they would only need to campaign in 4 cities.
That may be true, but the popular vote still would be the reason that the person would win, and you would have no reason to gerrymander.
Well, I mean, in like because I've seen both parties do that, and sometimes in reaction to each other, but I mean, like for instance, like when we're talking about people being discouraged to vote, why would somebody in Nebraska ever vote at all if they're only going to advertise and campaign in New York and LA and Dallas and Houston?
Well, they still would have, every candidate would still have to have well, you're right, because if the popular vote was only
if it was only numbers, if it was a pure, because we're not in a democracy, we're in a democratic republic, right?
Yeah.
Where it's not the popular vote. And I know, people, both sides, whenever your side loses and people start screaming, like whatever your side is, right? But that was the point of it, was that you still give voice to people in less densely populated areas.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it evened it out.
It does, and that's because otherwise you would have
really, but because if I can continue to remap an area, if the census says, for instance, that Texas is primarily Hispanic and Black, I'm just saying, that means that generally, based on history, the data shows that Hispanics or people of color generally vote Democratic. But if I can water that based on subdivisions within the map, for instance, if half of Harris County is Hispanic and the other half is white, then I, as a Republican, will try to redo that map to take advantage of more of the white population in that area. So that means that the representation is now going to assure me of a landslide, perhaps.
Yeah.
In the election. That's exactly, as you say, both parties do it probably in relationship
to each other.
You know.
Well, because so like when all that happened these last couple of years in Texas, then California, they're doing it now. And so you do have that gerrymandering that goes on, but I think the point of the Electoral College was to try to, as best as possible, give everybody, a say through elected representatives, right? But I mean, and for the time, I mean, even today, like we can't really think of a better system. We say do purely popular vote, but then we see the end result of that, because every time the popular vote would swing one way or the other, people would be screaming to go back to the Electoral College, right?
Yeah.
Because
I want to.
Yeah, everybody, and that's the thing. So we've reduced our politics not to what's best for the nation.
Yeah.
We've reduced it to my party winning. And
Back
then
in the day when people, there's always been the yin yang of politics, and the great thing was that most of the people tried to do what is right for the country, which meant that they would compromise. Now, sometimes, you'd have a little pork belly in the legislation. And this is, like in Louisiana, there was a bridge called the Bridge to Nowhere, because it's the middle of nowhere and it goes to nowhere. But it was a part of a piece of legislation that the senator said, hey, if I'm going to agree to this, then you're going to give me this bridge or give me this money for a bridge or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And that is the challenge that we have. But at that time, compromising was okay because everybody won pretty much. We've gotten to a place, as Pastor is saying, we are no longer willing to compromise. In essence, it's my way or the highway. And to the chagrin of most American constituents, they're not getting anything other than a whole bunch of
prices go up under every president every time.
That's a great point. You're right, and that's what people need to realize. Like in your life, you have more control over what goes on than what you think, and what you're doing is leaning on a lot of outside circumstances. They're not taking more responsibility for what they are. And I'm not just talking about in politics.
Yeah.
In everything. I mean, just like by teachers. Teachers, they shouldn't be raising the kids.
Come on.
They should be teaching the kids. But since you're not raising them at the house, you're trying to piggyback on these different things. And then even, I see it all the time, and I'm not talking bad about nobody. But with our kids, man, the screen time, they only get screen time during the weekend, and we started that when they were young because I was thinking about the future already. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, I'm seeing that these kids are getting addicted to this stuff. And so a lot of younger parents or people with younger kids, they're outsourcing that parenting to those screens. You see it wherever we go. We go to this grocery store, we go to everything. I was talking to a young man the other day. I was like, and one of the things I try to do is, like, whenever somebody has younger kids than me, I just tell them, hey, we watched these TV shows. We did this, we did this. And then I was like, one of the main things that we did, as soon as they could walk, they no longer sat in the car. at this store, and it didn't make sense to, sometimes my smokers or other people at times, but I just figured if they need to put in some type of work because they're going to be eating this food, and they don't you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like they don't
Yeah.
understand exactly the whole sentiment, but that way they'll be walking all the time, because what I see a lot of times is people will sit their kids in the car and they'll just be on the screen, right?
Mhm.
And then it just seems like, okay, you're giving them more screen time, instant gratification. Then when you want to ask them to do something, they're not
Yeah.
going to be responsive later on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I was always thinking about that. And hopefully, because they're still young, I'm trying to prepare them for adulthood so they'll be like the people we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
where you're taking more responsibility, you're more conscious all the time, because
Mhm.
that's ultimately what we're saying. Like, you need to be more intentional, but I think it starts from like a very young age.
Well, and I think like what you're describing, most parents aren't intentional parents.
Yes.
They're reactive parents.
Yes.
They don't see that this child's going to grow into this next phase of
Yes.
life, this next season.
Yeah.
So like we did the same thing with our kids. Like when they turned 10, like when they started getting in the double digits, part of what we did on their birthday was they got their own laundry basket, and we showed them how to do their own clothes.
Absolutely.
And as they went through their teenage years, we entrusted other responsibilities to them, so that by the time they were 18 or getting close to graduating, that they were already making some adult decisions.
Mhm.
Because like whenever my son went to school, he to college, one of the things, they had to have a whole separate parent meeting to tell the parents that you don't have the same access to your student anymore. You don't get their grades. You can't call their professor and say, "Why did little Johnny get a bad grade?" No, your child is an adult.
Yeah.
Now they have to sign permission over to you, and if they don't want you to see their grades, you don't get access. My son, one, they were like, recognize your kid is growing up. But my son, he said on his dorm hall, he had to do a class on how to wash and dry your clothes, how to do some of those things, because none of those kids knew,
Yeah.
So to extrapolate that up to now adulthood, people are not intentional anymore. And so we're reactive. We don't know where we're going. We just know what we're running from. And then when you come down to politics, when you come down to the other things, people aren't intentional. Everything is influencer based now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then now with the advent of AI, it's brought even more of what's true.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why we've seen an explosion of conspiracy theories that have been reignited, reinvigorated, because we don't know what to believe anymore. And because people have not been intentional about educating themselves, their idea of educating themselves is, I trust this person.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the trust of the person. So my buddy shared that with me, and I trust my buddy. So I'm hoping he did his research, because I'm not going to do mine.
Frankly,
Yeah.
this is boring.
Yes.
I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and do these things over here that I enjoy, and I'll relegate this other aspect of life to somebody that, quote unquote, knows what to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Whether that's the politician
Uh-huh.
or the minister of somebody else outside.
Yeah. Well, we see the same thing with discipleship. Like, and we tell our church that, we talk about in church how pro-family we are, man. We want to minister to families. But what does every church do on Sunday? As soon as the family gets there, they divide the family up, right? And saying it's in the best interest. But also, like for our kids, we outsourced discipleship to children's ministries and youth ministries. Those are not meant to be the primary source of discipleship for our kids. They're supposed to be a supportive source for the family and the parents discipling their kids. But a lot of parents, same thing. They don't care a whole lot about their own discipleship, so they're not going to care a whole lot about their child's. Yeah.
Everything is spiritual to me.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot separate, life as if, whether or not I have a good job or a bad job, it is just an education. It is also a spiritual aspect to my personality, my character. So if I am more aware of who I am spiritually, then the likelihood is that I'm going to make different decisions that's going to be much more effective at making sure that I have a better life, as well as how I interact with my potential wife and potential children.
That's right.
If I am totally ignorant of this aspect that makes me who I am and what I am, then in essence, I'm going to make decisions that, yes, I may marry, but I may end up in divorce. Yes, I may not marry, and I may have 4 kids that I'm not a father to.
Yeah.
And or I will vote for people who talk like me, who look like me, but nevertheless make decisions that I am not a part of, but I could care less because I've done my civic duty. So what good am I?
Right. Yeah.
In fact, in some cultures, when you turn a certain stage of life, they send you out into the woods to prove that you can survive, or that you can take care of yourself before you can become a man. And if you fail to do that, then in essence they ostracize you from the tribe, because they look at you as a liability. So why would I allow you to marry my daughter or stay in the tribe when you're going to look at us as some sort of welfare system? It doesn't. You cannot separate all of these issues that we're talking about, whether it be politics or education, without this understanding that until I become more intentional about my spirituality as opposed to my physiology, then we'll continue to have issues.
Okay, so and we are all on that same path, like all us two, right? Man, we need to invite some people that are younger and different perspectives, because not only they need to hear this, because I was just thinking about what you just said about discipleship, and I was a little embarrassed. I grew up in church. I didn't know God gave us a job to do. I didn't know about discipleship until maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. You see what I'm saying? But as soon as I did understand it, I made sure my first disciple, my wife, and then our kids disciple. And then I try to put all the resources together to do it. And even then, God was like, Chris, not everybody's going to be thinking like you. So you have to do what like Jesus does. Jesus met everybody where they were. And even the woman at the well, he didn't hit her with script.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, he hit her with understanding, and because she would have received that. She was even weird. Why are you even doing it here?
When you bring that up, this is me. So please forgive me. Church has done a remarkable job. They've done a very poor job. Jesus said, I know that you have need of all this stuff. He's saying, it's okay. I know you want a car and nice clothes and food and all this good stuff, but there's a way to get it that's going to be of not only effectual, but also is going to be fulfilling if you go about it this way. Most people have heard Jesus and heard about Jesus, but they have not understood that there's a way for me to have a good life that I have not yet understood, but I continue to go after it, and I'm frustrated. And I live in a world where others may have it, and I don't understand how they got it.
Yes.
And they align themselves with maybe an organization, a politician, or whatever. Maybe if I do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we could ever get them to understand that the process is much more simple than that.
Yeah.
No, you're exactly on the right, because I when I talked at Agnew and then at the high school this week, I talked on this because I'm preaching on whenever in John 10:10, whenever Jesus said he'd come to give us life in abundance, right? So the thing is, and I think what you're hitting on that is so accurate is people started making blessings the goal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So whatever your goal is becomes your God. So if God is a means to get a blessing, blessing is your God, and God is a tool to get to your God.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So then you start asking, how do I get it? What do I do? And not, why am I doing this?
Miss your purpose.
right?
Your purpose.
Missing purpose. You're missing what he said. He said, seek first the kingdom, and then I'll add all these things to you, right? These things will take care of themselves. So like whenever I have people tell me like they're trying to seek a new job or make a new direction in life, and they're like, I want to find out what God's will is. I say, well, here's one of the things. We have this amazing ability in the church to take what God says he left a mystery and try to make it plain, and then take what he made plain and turn it into a mystery. Right? And so here's the thing. It doesn't really matter what job you have. Glorify God in that job. Honor God in the way you do that job. Make sure that you're dealing with people and conveying respect and love towards people in that job. Now, there are some jobs, like you could go to extremes and say things
what
like,
I mean by is that my personal belief is that I believe we come into this world with a job.
okay,
The purpose that I have is aligned with the job that I go after. Now, I can go after a job making $50 billion, but it may not be fulfilling, and it will not provide the purpose by which I came into the world to fulfill. My role is to, in a sense, connect the dots. Because as I meditate, as I spend time, and as I read the Bible, I believe innately the clarity will come about what it is that I'm supposed to do with the talents and gifts that I have. And as I do that and align myself more fully with the teachings of Christ, then all these things shall be added as you suggest. However, there's a purpose for me being here. And so everything goes right back to the idea that spiritual direction innately flowing from me will draw the things to me that I need and have and provide.
Yeah, well, so like one of the things is
I know it sounds, some people say just, blab it and grab it or whatever. I really believe that God intended for us to have a good life and to live a good life, but there's a methodology that he intended.
We'll define good life.
My first idea of good life is fulfillment.
Okay.
So when I get up every day, I know that I'm about to be in a place where I can talk to people, provide a means to affect their lives. So if I'm an architect, then I'm always going to create buildings that provide a sense of security, pleasure, or whatever, aesthetically, and at the same time be in an environment that I can talk to people about who and what I really am.
Okay.
To me, that's the good thing.
So it's not tied purely to finance or purely to things like that. Okay. Yeah, because in America we've reduced everything to money. Everything is so there are common the will of God when we look at it. There's several passages in scripture that talk about it and stuff, but there's some of God's will is the will for all of us. It's not individualized in that sense, like to glorify God. That's his will, right? There's also times because in being able to study like at Liberty and I have students that are all over the world, and I've got to interact with, when I was going to school, fellow students that from all over the world, and whenever I get to talk to people that are from other countries in particular, because we live in this American bubble and we have restructured American Christianity. That's the reason it looks so different than biblical Christianity. It's not because it's gotten better. It's because we've redefined a lot of stuff, right? But one of the things that I ask them, those that are serving in other countries, particularly countries that maybe don't have a Western mindset, maybe, some other things, and every one of them, it's been amazing. I was like, so if you're serving in this country, like, what's the big difference that you see between serving in that country in ministry and serving in America in ministry? And you'd be amazed at how often they say Americans have an underdeveloped theology of suffering because we don't understand the purpose of suffering. We don't understand that that God sometimes wills that we suffer. There are times in Scripture we see that, because it's not about your circumstance of life. It's about the God you serve in the circumstances that you're brought to.
But is this going to keep us on the path.
Shit. Part of the
See,
audience.
Because see,
You're right.
uh,
Another podcast.
Yeah. We're kind of chasing a rabbit. Yeah.
We ultimately are saying the same thing, that people are getting away from what they truly say that they believe when they say
Right.
they're a Christian.
Yeah.
And if we continue down this path of not owning everything God said, we individually are.
Mhm.
We're individually his children. We're individually have a relationship.
right.
And that's the big thing that we're getting away from. And we're following somebody else because we think we're inadequate. We're inadequate.
Right. Yeah, well, or we also, so that's the other thing, is that in America we have individualized everything, right? So there is the individual relationship, but there's also the community aspect that we have lost. Right. So when you look at the book of in Acts, the church, the people were voluntarily selling, property and other things to help take care of each other. Now you turn that into, and I believe part of where we're at in our political system and stuff is because we're asking the government to step beyond the limits of the institution that it is supposed to, the job it's supposed to do according to the way God designed it. The government so God designed or instituted three major institutions in Scripture. We have family, church or worship, and government. He tells us the purpose of government, is to be that demonstration of taking care of unrighteousness. It doesn't yield the sword for no reason, right? All of that. But what has happened is we've started outsourcing family matters, church matters to the government, to where we say the government's supposed to take care of our family. The government's supposed to do this. And then you have certain government structures that try to imitate some things that Scripture talks about. And then you have out of that, you have things like communism and stuff where they say, what's the difference between the book of Acts where they are, people are selling and giving things to take care of each other? Well, then we, through socialism or communism, that's what that represents. Well, there's a big difference between, a government controlled communism or socialism versus Christian compassion that results in giving. Right. Because, go ahead.
I know. I think what you're saying is accurate to a certain degree, but I think we also, as people, have looked at the government as a singular entity to it.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's comprised of people. If I have a way of looking at life that's not in alignment with the true essence of who God created us to be, then yes, we're going to have some real issues coming out of that quote unquote entity. But if the senators and representatives are basing their decisions on their principles that Christ embodied and Christ taught, then that entity that we call the government is going to function in a much more benevolent and at the same time more effective way than it currently operates. So our role, as far as I'm seeing it, is to help create an environment where information is pushed out that causes individuals with singular family, school, church, or whatever government to look at themselves in a different manner, and we hold them accountable for whether or not they abide by the principles that we say are important for us to operate with. And so it no longer is the government per se that's the evil thing, or the educational system that's the evil thing. We have boiled it down to individuals within those systems. And if we could change their way of looking at things, then perhaps these entities that are necessary. Because if you read, like I said, the Common Sense, Thomas Paine, he talks about the necessary evil. We need the government because at some point we are so full of people, so full of communities, so full of cities that no longer can a person in Dallas, every person in Dallas wanting to be represented, they can't go down to Boston or DC. So we need to pick individuals.
Representatives, yes. Yeah.
But if those individuals are really not representative of what I feel and think,
Yeah.
then in essence, when they go to DC or Austin, they're going to they're an aberration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the issue is, how do we get John, who's a citizen, to think of himself as God sees him, and use that to push the button according to what he believes should be done when they get to Austin or
Mhm.
DC. Also, when Sam gets to DC, he's operating based on the principles that we say are important. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
traditional, because we got politicians say we're going to go back to the traditional way of living. Well, whose tradition?
Yeah.
Whose values?
Right.
Not
Yeah.
just talk about putting it, as Chris was saying earlier, not putting 10 Commandments on the walls of the schools and stuff, actually living it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing, is that when you have to try to force people to take on a moral position, it always backfires. Because, like, what was the purpose of the law, the Mosaic law in the Old Testament? It was to reveal unrighteousness. It itself could not provide righteousness, right? Then you had the sacrificial system that demonstrated the seriousness of that unrighteousness, that sin demands death in order for there to be redemption. And then, of course, Christ fulfilling that, and that he shows that now here's the way to righteousness. It's what in Romans and other places, Paul frames salvation in the lens of righteousness, right? The thing that, like, if I get an advertisement for somebody running a campaign, and the first thing they do is they're saying strong Christian, family man.
Really?
Here's what I do. I throw that one in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is because, so there's a saying, it says, you don't know the lion because he roars. You know the lion because he's a lion. And if you've got to tell me,
Absolutely,
that means that maybe show me, Yeah. And so that's a frustrating thing for me.
we had a guy end up in divorce. And the reason that he ended up in divorce was because he said, the devil. But when you asked the wife, she said, we never had any fun.
Mhm.
He was always dictating what we did, when we would go out of the city. We went to a church, we went to some sort of function, but we could never have any fun. So there was no wisdom, there was no compassion, there was no true love.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say I'm a Christian, maybe I need to know what that smells like.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah. Well, because, all right, so think about this. About 70% of people in America claim to be Christian, of one branch or another, right? But yet we are so divided. We can't even agree on some of the basic moral stuff, right? And so there's some of these things that are going on, but then, but when we look at this, like, so I think about when you were talking about, like, we're educating people and stuff. We used to have that phrase that would come up on Saturday mornings, knowledge is power.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's untrue.
Yeah.
Knowledge is not power.
It's true.
No, because we have access to all the knowledge in the world. I tell our kids when they ask me a question, I say, between God and Google, you can find an answer to everything. But it's not knowledge is power. It's the understanding of that knowledge, the application of that knowledge, the wisdom of what to do with that knowledge.
Yeah.
That's where power comes in, because
yeah.
we can try. Well, and also, in order to educate someone, you have to have somebody who wants to be educated. You have to have a learner.
When Jesus was talking to the people, he talked to them based on where they were.
Yeah.
And he used things that incited some desire within them to hear what he has to say. Because in essence, if he tells me that, hey, James, I know better, this is how so I'm now listening to this guy and I'm being inspired, but at the same time, he's telling me in a way that if I can do this, it's going to elevate my game to the point where I'm going to be much more fulfilling. And then he tells me that if I do this and become more fulfilling in it, I'm going to have a greater testimony for others who want to do the same. All of a sudden, my life changes. That's where I believe wanting to heal, only just in church, because it's more than church.
Mm-hmm.
How can I have a better life based on the fact that when I hook up with someone, we're of the same heart? Go to the used car salesman. I'm no longer looking at the used car salesman as a used car salesman. I'm looking at that as a person who really wants to help me get a better car so that I can reliably go from A to B. Mm-hmm. If I know that I live in a community that thinks and acts and responds to life like I do, that it's going to be safer, it's going to be much more amenable to bringing in good vibes, as they say, then why would I not want to live in that community? And if I can live in a community like that, how can I help others create communities that exist like that? Not based on some idea about having 10 commandments on the wall and I got my Bible on the front room table, but I live it based on my compassion, my zeal to love and to be respectful. If I can create that, why would I not want that? And so we, being who we are, how do we teach it to the masses? How do we get people inspired to live a life that is consistently above and not beneath, that is full of not only the favor of God, but the love of and the compassion and the respect for the person next door to me? Whether they do what I do, I can't use, I can't base my association with Chris if he only does what I think he should do.
Right.
What if he doesn't? Mm-hmm. I should love him anyway. And if I love him anyway, maybe somehow or another down the road, Chris will change the way he does what he does. But if he doesn't, so
That's exactly right.
Exactly. That's not our job.
God does not. God does not say, well, he's not doing what I think he should do.
Right.
There was a great churches back in the day where the black God is up there and the black guy on the ground shooting dice. And that's not God. He falls over there.
Yeah.
We've got to demystify this idea of spirituality.
Right. Yeah, no, you're exactly right, because then that's one of the things.
You come here to preach, No.
But here's the thing: is all these things. So one of the things I teach really is that every spiritual reality has physical representations. Okay, and so in that, so we're supposed to love and respect every person. Like so people say respect is earned. Mm-hmm. It's actually it, and I know where people are coming from when they say that. You're supposed to, your respect for another person reveals more about you than it does them. Now, can respect be lost? Absolutely. Right. But if respect is earned, then I can keep moving the bar. Like if I don't like you, I can keep moving the bar to justify my disrespect. Absolutely. Right.
Hey guys,
we need to have some more of these.
Will.
Yeah.
We will, man. This is, like I said, man, this is good. I knew getting you two together would be, because there's a lot of wisdom. Okay. So as you know, at the end of every podcast, we want to leave one little gem that we personally. So, we'll start with James and then just leave the people something. And we're going to come back at this subject again. We're going to, read, because this is really good. I think we're getting towards the point to where the change that we want to see or we want to implement is there. So in order to really, so James, go first.
There's two things I will say. One, first, major in understanding yourself spiritually. That's the first thing. For me, I'm not going to say you need to go to church and all that. All I'm saying is that there's an aspect of you that you don't know. Find out more about the real you. There. If you want to see good change in your area, in your life, it starts locally. If you want to see better schools, better roads, more stores, whatever, it starts in your local community. Once again, 10% up to 20% of local elections is the voting participants. It needs to be better than that. Your mayor represents you locally. If you are not voting for that person, then in essence you are asking for more of the same that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Yeah.
Thanks, So all I want to do, all I wanted to say, man, is that, like you said, take more responsibility on your ownership, on who you are and what's going on in your little circle of influence, right? As soon as I learned about discipleship, I said, okay, cool. What does that mean? That means that I have to be a disciple first, and then I want to pass it on to my wife and then my kids. And it kind of blew up my mind that I didn't learn that in church coming up. But then I started thinking, hold up, was I really trying to study? Was I really trying to pay attention? What did I not do in order to learn this? Because the Bible been here longer than, so evidently it was me. If God didn't change, it was me. So I couldn't even blame anybody else. So we have to take more responsibility. Just start with your little circle influence, your own, like James was saying. So that's what I said. Just meditate on that.
Yeah. I piggyback off of that is that change does not start at the White House, it starts in your house, right? And so if yeah, it's that because make sure that like we're being intentional about our own spiritual growth, our own and educating ourselves into, what's going on within our government, but also we can't have a double standard. Right. We can't say I'm going to treat this group of people different than I treat this group of people. And then in that process of educating yourself, if you listen to a 24-hour news station, so I'm looking at the camera, this is a 24-hour news station. Here's the danger of a 24-hour news station. Politicians want votes at any cost, and a 24-hour news station wants views at any cost. So here's the thing. I would encourage you to intentionally go interact with the other side, whatever the other side is for you. Go and say, so if I normally listen to Fox News, maybe I'm going to go over and I'm going to listen to CNN, because everything's getting spun with perspective, because it's not journalism anymore, right? Yeah, absolutely. And also try to get out of the American bubble.
Yeah.
Go and listen to, I was amazed the first time I went to the UK and realized they knew more about our political system than I did.
Yes.
Because they were watching it, and the rest of the world is, because America still leads the world, and the world is watching. So do those things, like, be the change that you want to see. Make sure that if you're wanting somebody else to be different, say, how am I exemplifying that? How am I representing that? How am I doing that? Right. And sit down. I said two things. Now
That's all right.
Here's another thing. Right. So here's the other thing. When was the last time you had a conversation over a meal with somebody who disagreed with you? Somebody that was from a different perspective, different background, different culture, different race, different any of that, and just sit down and ask questions out of curiosity, not out of attack. Ask questions to learn rather than respond. And I think a lot of those things are really helpful for us to have those perspectives. And that's kind of the heart of like what we're trying to do with the podcast is see different perspectives and be able to interact in a way that's loving, where we're still friends afterwards, right? But we can see that, hey, it's okay. Some things are open-handed things that we can disagree on, and it's still okay. And that's what used to be, because there was this just popped back in my head when we were talking about the way America used to vote, is that once you voted, everybody was like, okay, well, this is the decision. That's my president. Now we say, I didn't vote for him, so they're not my president. Right. And so then we just stay in a constant state of division.
Says, pray for the leaders.
Yeah.
He's no longer my leader. So I don't have to pray for him.
Right. Or they'll spin it what they're praying for them. Right. So, I think all those things, be intentional about, man, if we don't figure out a way to bridge these gaps of division, we're headed to some dangerous futures.
These are his words: forceful, even to the point of being somewhat mean spiritually.
A jerk for Jesus. That's what we call it, our church.
He incited how in his country, the Muslims, when they found that you were doing some deviant type of behavior, they killed you, and he was all right with that. And so it helps me to appreciate that sometimes we're debating, but our debate is so far afield that we can't hear each other.
Yeah.
And so I had to step back and just listen, and now go back and chew on it. If we should ever to have a conversation again, maybe I'll have a different way of approaching it.
Yeah, no, and I think, that's the thing. I think people are so hungry for truth, genuine, authentic stuff. That I think that's where there's hope for our younger generations, because they've grown up in being advertised and influenced and all that, to the point that there's a shift taking place in churches.
Oh yeah.
Because older people, and I'm including myself in that. Our older, adult generations complained about lengths of sermon, depths of sermon, all of these type of things. Our younger people are saying, I want to know more.
Yeah.
I don't care about all the hopping around. I don't care about all the show. I would rather have a simple room. We sing a few songs without instruments, and I get to encounter the Word of God, and it be a genuine thing. And that's the other thing. We have to seek what's true. Yeah, it is.
Okay, yeah. Man, this is good. Thank y'all for joining us, man. We're going to continue this, have James back, and we're going to continue this We the People, where we're going over current events, politics, all different things. And we want to invite some more perspectives, maybe even some people who don't believe in Jesus.
Absolutely.
I just want to have those conversations, man. And I'm just going to say this, I'm so blessed to be able to have these two brothers in my mind, because I really thought I was alone for a long time. All right, in being able to talk to people.
Yeah.
But I'm not. And we're here on the battlefield together. We're here with you. God loves you.